Hey everybody, I'm just going to get the link shared on Twitter to let people know that I'm streaming, and then we'll get going here. Sorry for the echo effect. Oh, did I spell defense wrong? No, I don't think so. High-powered device manager. Yeah, I got it. It's an S, not a C. That's fine. Come join the stream. Okay, so what I have is a DevNet sandbox, which is for the REST API, right? Firepower Threat Defense REST API. And I have a blank project. We're going to do this from kind of soup to nuts today, from start to finish. I don't need the headset on. And I'm going to be referencing some code on a separate screen here, but just to make sure I get it right. But I am going to try to be writing this code sort of from scratch today. So let's get started, and I'll show you some things about FTD. So we're going to get the password here from the sandbox, and we're going to log in as admin and that password. And the first place we're going to go is into the API. So again, it's a GUI, and you know how I feel about GUIs. They are great, they're good for visualizing, but there is a lot of stuff in here, and I want to extract it and put it into more human readable, business ready documents. So if you do the little triple dots here, you can launch an API Explorer, and this is where we're going to find the APIs that we're going to use today. So the API that I know has things populated in it is, because I've already done one just to make sure that I know what I'm doing here. Look at all of these APIs. Look at them all. Just an incredible rich source of truth here, source of data about our network firewall. So if we go to network objects, network object, there are networks, and then network object ID, network groups, network group ID. So let's start with the networks. And you can see the data that we get back. It is a paginated API. I'm not sure what the limit is per page, so we're going to have to build some pagination in. We'll do that a little bit later. Let's get it working first, and then we'll try to handle the pagination. And maybe we could quickly Google that and find out Cisco FTD API pagination. Paging, let's see what this says here. Yeah, so these are the, right, but what's the limit? So offset, we could put an offset in and say 100 or 200 results, but it is paginated. I'm wondering what the limit for results are in the pagination is really what I'm trying to find. But we'll come back to that. I do have a way to deal with pagination, and it isn't that hard. Hopefully we'll get to that today. But let's get started with the code. And we're going to use this Object Networks API. So I'm going to try to adjust this laptop so I can reference my old code. And I have coffee in the way as well. So it takes the username and password, and it's a token-based API system. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new virtual environment, Python 3m venv, and we're going to call this one, let's call it firewall. And we're going to source firewall bin activate to get into the virtual environment and go back into my Sublimation directory. I called it Sublimation just because it's related to the human defense mechanisms, and it's a positive defense mechanism, and the name is not taken on PyPy, which is important. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pip install poetry first, pip install poetry, and make a new poetry project. Let me bring this up so you can see everything. So poetry new sublimation. Is that the right spelling? Sublimation, yep. And what I always do, I'm not running any tests yet, so I delete that. I drag the project toml out and I delete the readme first. And then in my toml file, we're going to make some changes to the toml file. So I'm going to reference an existing piece of code just to make sure I get my toml file correct. So the first thing I do is drop my dependency to Python 3.8 because I'm running 3.10 and it inherits 3.10. So I drop that to 3.8 so that people running 3.8 and above can run it. I'm going to include packages in my README, and the packages is going to be Sublimation, and the README, we'll do the README later. And then we need a script because I want to run this as a script from the CLI, and the script is going to be called, right, Sublimation script run, and the rest of it I'm pretty sure I can build from memory. So we need a few packages. Now I want to make YAML. I want to use requests, so we're going to say poetry add requests. We're going to say poetry add PyYAML. We're going to say poetry add Jinja2, need the templating. And we're going to say poetry add rich-click. And we're going to clear the screen, and I think that's all we need for now. We could add other things later, but for now I think that's all we need to get started with this project. So that's the toml file, and that helps me put this on PyPy as a package that you can install. And the description up here is business ready documents from Cisco Firepower Threat Defense FTD. Okay, so now I definitely need two files in here. I need a I need my sublimation.py file, and I need a script file. I'm just going to reference, right, it's just called script.py, and my script is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We're going to say from sublimation, excuse me, import CLI, and we're going to define a runtime environment and run the CLI. So that's all that goes in the script, and again the script is referenced in the toml file under poetry scripts, and we pick that script. So now let's get into the main Python, and I'm just going to reference some working code. And this actually isn't that difficult to do. So we're going to import some things. We're going to import OS. We're going to import JSON. Definitely need JSON. Import rich. Is it rich click? Let me just quickly check something here. I know we want rich click. I'm just not sure of the syntax here. Rich click as click. Import rich underscore click as click. Okay, yeah. As click. We're going to import requests, and I think that's all we need to import. And then we're going to say from pathlib import path, and from Jinja2 import environment and file system loader. And that's really all we need to get going. So what I like to do is to make my class first. So we're going to say class sublimation, and then we're going to define the init string of self. And what we need for this is the URL of the Firepower Threat Defense, the username, and the password. That's all that we need. And then we're going to say self.url equals URL self dot username equals username, and self dot password equals password. And that's pretty much it for that class. Now, then I move to the bottom. Let's do the bottom part of this code, and then we'll fill in the code later. So what we want is an @click.command, and then we want an @click.option, and our option here is going to be --URL, and that is going to have a prompt of FTD URL. That is going to have help of, you know, the FTD URL. I'm missing something. Something's not quite right here. Should that all be single quotes? Is that? I'm off to a rocky start here. I think that, not sure why that is. Let's keep going here, and then we want the required equals true, and the environment variable equals URL. I don't know why this is expected function or class declaration after decorator. All right, so then oh, I see. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. @click dot, and what we're going to do is just copy this whole thing and do username here. Username, FTD, username, FTD, username, and the environment variable of all caps username. I'm going to copy that and do password. Now for password, we'll make it hidden. That way it can be easily typed on the screen without any problems. So required is true, environment variable is password, and hide input equals true. Okay, so those are the three options we need to get from the user: the URL, the username, and the password. And then we're going to define our CLI function here, and it takes in URL, username, password. And then we're going to invoke the class equals Sublimation, and this again takes in the URL, username, password, and let's put some spaces up here too, just for readability. And then we're going to invoke class dot sublimation. Yeah, rise and shine with some APIs, Dan. That's exactly it. So I haven't actually defined this class yet. Good to see you, Danny. Thanks for joining. I couldn't help myself. Security came up, and I did ACI so quickly and so easily that I wanted to play with firepower threat defense. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've never actually had my hands on one. My previous environment, I can't really disclose what we used, but we had not got to FTD yet. So then at the very bottom, we're going to say if name equals main, call the CLI. I have too many equals. So now I need to make this sublimation class, and that's going to be the first class that I make, and I'm going to call, or function I should say, and I'm going to call my other functions from this function. Right, so define sublimation, and that's going to be self. And the first thing we're going to do is self.token equals, oh, it's wonderful. And it's easy to use. I like the, well, we're going to explore it a bit, but I like the token system. It's kind of like ACI uses a cookie system. FTD uses the bearer token. So it's a, I like it. It's, I'm used to bearer tokens. So then self.get, speaking of tokens, we're going to write a function to go get our token. So we're going to define get token. Now for getting tokens, I have a little function I'm going to try to copy here, but we're going to access token equals none to begin with, and then we're going to use our requests library dot packages. And I like this. I found this is a little easier than you can do. I'll do this in one line instead of importing URL lib and disabling warnings. You can do it in line with the request packages URL lib3 dot disable warnings, because it's a self-signed certificate, so that'll suppress any warnings. So then we're going to have a payload, and that payload is going to be an F string, and inside of this F string it's going to be JSON. So just give me 1 second to take a look at the Json payload so that I get this right. And it's not that hard. So the payload is going to be, and that's actually not, is going to be grant type, and that is password, and then username, and that is our self.username. And I have to put self in my get token, right? Self.username. And then we're going to have password, and that's going to be self.password, again what the user is sending us. And that is it. So that is our main string there, and then we have to wrap that in the right JSON. So that's our payload. We need to put this to the API to get back a token. And it's a specific type, a grant type password, a username, and a password. It's a little weird, it's a little unique. I haven't seen this type of grant type payload before, but that's the way they do it. So then we need some headers. So our auth headers are going to be content type, that needs to be in quotes, and it is application / JSON. And then we're going to accept application JSON as our headers, and that's pretty standard. And then we're going to make our request. So let's say response equals request dot post, and then an F string here to post to our self.url, and that is going to /API/FDM/latest/FDM/token. So post that against the token, and we're posting our data equals payload, and our headers equals auth headers, and we want to say verify equals false since it's self-signed. Now you're probably not running a self-signed cert in production, so you don't need to suppress the warnings and you don't need the verify false, but for this sandbox I need to do that. Now I could do some logic here to say if it equals 200, do something else, try and accept. We can build in the testing later, but I like to just build it quickly and raw like this for now. So then let's get our token and see if we can print that token to the screen. Right, so we're going to say access token, access token equals response.json.get access token. And then what we can do is say print, let's just print the token, print access token, and what we will do ultimately is return that access token. So then self.token here will equal the returned access token. So let's see how this runs so far, right? So cd source, oh hang on, I gotta rename my folder. Source, that's better. cd source sublimation, and we're going to say Python. So if we do dash help, no, sorry, Python 3 sublimation dash help. I didn't install Jinja 2. I spelled it wrong. Jinja 2. All right. Ha. So let's do our help. So there's our nice help, right? It needs dash URL, dash username, dash password. And I could do that this way, dash URL, dash username, and pass them in. Or I could just run it and paste in the code here. But what I'm going to do is set them as environment variables to accelerate my development. So we're going to say export URL equals, we're going to take our URL. Now be careful, it's not the slash. We don't want the slash. So delete that, and then export username equals admin, and export password equals, and the password is this sandbox. Okay, so now I can just run Python 3 sublimation, enter, and so it failed. There's some problem here. My VPN is still up? Yeah. Response access code equals response get access token. So it doesn't like this access token. This line here is not happy. Let's just print the response and see what's going on here. $500. So I'm not sending it something is incorrect in what I'm sending it as a payload. Let me just check my code. Grant type, password. Oh, hang on, that's why this needs to be in quotes. Password right there. That's better. Okay, so we have a response of 400. So it's not finding the page. Okay, so I've gotten past my 500 error, and I'm posting to the right URL here, self.url, API, FDM, latest FDM token. That looks correct. Let me just quickly take a look here. Request.post self.url/API FDM latest FDM token. That should be the right URL here. Date equals payload, headers equals auth headers, verify false. username is spelled wrong here. That looks like a problem. Username. Two N's. Hang on. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, just a couple typos because I'm looking here and typing there. All right, so we have a 200 response code, which we could act upon. I could try it, and if it doesn't equal 200, send an error. And there is our token, which I'm returning to this function. So self.token is that token right now. So let's get rid of our prints because we don't need to print that stuff anymore. We could print something like, you know, if it equals 200, we have a token and it's going to work. So now let's move on to the network objects. So what I'm going to do here is say, how do I want to do this? I think I'm just going to call the network objects. Right, so what I'm going to say is parsed JSON equals, and we're going to do a JSON.dumps of a function here, self.network objects, and that's a function, and we're going to indent this by 4, and we're going to sort keys equals true. So now I need to write this self.network objects function. Right, so define network objects, and what we need for network objects is to define our URL. So self.url equals, I don't even think I need to do self.url. Well, let me just make it URL because it's local to this function. So our URL is going to be an f string of self.url / and then API FDM latest, and then we get the rest of it from the Explorer. So object networks. So we're going to take that object networks and put it after API FDM latest / object networks. And that should be our f string, and I need to make this self. So that is our API call to go get the objects. Now it needs headers, and the headers for this one are pretty straightforward. Going to be accept application JSON, comma, authorization. How do we authorize against this API? Well, it is an f string for bearer token, and we pass it self.token. So that's how we authorize against the API now that we have a token. So then the rest is going to be pretty straightforward. Response equals request get URL, headers equals headers, verify equals false because it's self-signed. So then let's do a print here to say an f string network objects status code, and we're going to put in response dot status code. Making a lot of little typos today. I need some more of this life juice. And we're going to say for URL, just to give us a bit of some feedback here. And then we'll do response dictionary equals response dot JSON and return the response dictionary. So now what we're saying is parse JSON equals that, and then what we'll do is print parse JSON. All right, so let's try it. And what we should get back is a nice JSON message. So there's our JSON, network object status code 204, and then there's our URL, and there is our JSON. And you can see that it is paginated. I have, right, limit is 10. So it looks like it's a limit of 10 results per page, but I have everything in one page. We'll come back to the pagination maybe later. Let's template this and make it the business ready document, sort of the point of this exercise. And then I'll try and dig up some pagination code to see if we can get it paginated. Or in theory, I would need to find one that is paginated with more than 10 results to test it, but we will add the pagination later, maybe not today. So now the next thing is going to be to sort of done with my side code here, and what I'm going to do is take some existing code from my ACI work the other night. So what we're going to do is, instead of printing that parsed JSON, we're going to say all files. So let me just get a side by side with my ACI project, wherever that went. And I'm not going to copy paste it, I'll just type it in so you can see how this works. But I'm going to have a function here at the bottom called all files. Right, so what we're going to do is I am just going to copy that to the bottom here. So these are all the different file types, and we're going to write these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 functions with Jinja templates. And the next thing we're going to do up here is to call the all files and pass in the JSON. Right, so self.allFiles parsed JSON, and that will call those all files. So before I call all files, let's comment them out and do them one at a time. So the JSON file is really simple. It's really easy to do. We're going to write a function here, define JSON file taking in self and parsed JSON. And let's, to pick the right file name, and we're going to need some folders here. So let's make some folders. Right, network objects, JSON, YAML, CSV, Markdown, HTML, and mind map. So what we're going to do is, do we have the path? Object networks. So what we can do is something like this: if object slash networks yeah, because the other one's called network groups, right? Oh, I've logged out. That sucks. Yeah, it's a firewall, so it's going to be a little bit sticky with the timeouts. I just want to check for the if string here. I know there's network. I think it's networks and then network objects. I just got to be careful here because I don't want to pick one that's not unique. Yeah, network groups. So networks is unique. So I don't even need an object. I can just say if networks in. That's why I set self.url. So I do need to set this to be self.url. Yeah, in self.url. Right, so if it's the networks API that's being templated, then with open, and we're going to say network objects slash JSON slash network objects dot JSON, and we're going to write that file. I should use the same quotes in both here. I'm going to write that file as f for file, and then f.write parsed JSON. So in theory, if I write this, run this code, I should get what you see on the screen here. as a JSON file. No, URL is not defined. Where did I forget that? Oh, in the requests. In my request here, self.url, excuse me. So in theory, I should get a JSON file. And there we go. It's that easy. It's that easy. That's better than Postman, right? So now I have my network objects. I have a self, if I want to follow this API and get the details for each network object. But that's basically the same thing as I would see here. Now, does that work as a hyperlink? Unauthorized. Even though I'm logged in. Huh, that's weird. Doesn't prompt me or anything. That's too bad, because I would make it a hyperlink from the code where you could take you to that link. What if I mean, I could manipulate that and put the username and password right in the link, since we have the username and password. But let's just move along. So the next file I'm going to make is the YAML file. So let's uncomment out our self.yaml. We're just going to copy the JSON and rename a few things here. So network objects YAML and then .yaml. And I'm going to change this to clean YAML. And what we're going to say is clean YAML equals, I don't want to do this from off the top of my head, I probably could, but let's make sure and get it right. Right, equals YAML.dump of the JSON loads parsed JSON, and let's do a default flow style equals false. And I think that should make a YAML file. Oh, I didn't import YAML. Hang on. I need to import YAML. So let's run that. Oh, I didn't name it YAML file. Hang on. Geez, YAML file. So now I have a YAML file, a nice dictionary of each item as a YAML dictionary, and the paging information at the bottom. Okay, so now let's move on to the CSV file. And this is where I'm going to need to get my Jinja templating involved. So we're going to take most of this code again, and this is a CSV file. And this is CSV, and we're going to call this something else. So let's quickly reference the working ACI code here for CSV files. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, so what we need to do for the CSV file is set up our template directory. So template directory equals path __ file dot resolve dot parent, and then we're going to set up an environment variable of environment loader equals file system loader, and we need it as a string and the template directory. And then we're going to say CSV template equals environment dot get template, and we're going to call this ftd csv.j2, and then we're going to say CSV output equals CSV template.render. And what do we need to send it in? Well, we're going to say API equals self.url, so we know which API we need to call here. And then we're going to say data to template, and it could be whatever you want. I like to say data to template universally as a JSON loads of the parsed JSON. So that's what we're feeding into the Jinja2 template. Two variables, API, which has the URL, and data to template, which has this JSON payload. So then what we're going to do is take that CSV output, and that's what we're going to write to this CSV file. So now we need to make our Jinja2 template. So we're going to do a new file, and what we're going to start with is if API, if networks in API, and that if, and now we start doing our Jinja2 templating. So let's take a look at the JSON and figure out the Jinja2 template for this. It's going to be pretty straightforward. So I need to go into items, and we need a header row since it's a CSV file. So what I like to do is take the whole thing and paste it in here, and links.self, let's make that at the end. We'll put that at the end of the document. And so then what we're going to do is we're just going to say link, and we're going to get rid of all that. So here's how I do this. That's going to be a comma. Is I get rid of all the values. And then I get rid of the quotation marks at the front. Should I copy that right now? I'll just do it a second time. Okay, so then, yeah, rich click is phenomenal, Danny. It's basically click, but powered by rich. So we get color-coded output for the help. It's really the only advantage that I've seen so far over just normal click, but the help is color-coded. So that's an advantage of using rich click. So then we're going to make this our header row. And let's rearrange this so that the type is before subtype. So there's our header row for this CSV file. And now we need our for loop. So we have to be careful here. For, and we can just say item in data to template, square bracket, quotes, items. Right, so we want to loop inside of this array. And we're going to end our for loop. And what we're going to do is copy this all again. And you'll see what I'm going to do here. We're going to rearrange them so type is before subtype and links.self is at the end. We're going to get rid of our data fields again. Now we need to get rid of, this is going to be a little bit weird, but that's going to be .self. And there's no quote at the end. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do a find on the first quotation mark and replace it with mustache mustache item dot. I missed one here. Item dot, and then we're going to just do the mustache is there, and then for the comma, we're going to find the comma and replace it with space mustache mustache comma. And then we're going to collapse everything. And in theory, we should have a CSV file. It's that easy. So I've written the CSV code. Let me uncomment. I've uncommented the CSV code. Let's save this. And let's take a look. I don't know, what do you think? No errors, that's good. And there is our CSV file. That easy. And this is like just incredible, right? I can sort them by as system defined, right? There's the different names. There's the types, subtypes, the value, right? So if I'm only interested in, you know, the default route, version looks a little weird to me. Let's see what version is all about here. Unless that's just a unique hash, and then our hyperlink at the end to the direct object. What is that version? Okay, no, that's just what it is. It's just some random key identifier. Okay, so the CSV is done, which means everything else is pretty much done. It really is. We're going to move on to the Markdown file next. And the Markdown file is basically a copy-paste of the CSV. It really is. Markdown file. I'm going to just make these unique. Markdown template. We need to rename this template to Markdown. This is Markdown. This is Markdown output, and that's what we want to write into the file is Markdown output. So we're going to copy the whole CSV file and rename it to Markdown. We're going to drop this down a row and put a header in, network objects. I'm going to put a pipe space pipe, pipe space pipe, find the comma and replace it with space pipe space, replace all. And then there's a little bit of tedious work here where we have to put our delimiter row in. Not the end of the world, but we do have to do this to make this a nice markdown table. Save that, run the code. And did I not comment something out? Oh, I didn't. Aha, I just overwrote. Hang on, I forgot something here. Markdown MD. That's my mistake. We'll run that again. Regenerate our CSV, and there is our Markdown file. Right, this would render on a GitHub repository. Oh, and I have hyperlinks. So let me update the Markdown template to make those hyperlinks. So that's the link at the end. We're going to put in URL in square brackets, and then wrap our variable in round brackets, regenerate the code, and now we should have URLs. And we do, hyperlinks. Now they're unauthorized, but we can work on that later. So those are the URLs. Okay, so then what we're going to do is our HTML is next. And we just copy our Markdown and update this to HTML files, HTML template, HTML output, HTML, name of the Jinja template is HTML, and we're writing the HTML. So again, we're going to copy the CSV, rename it HTML, and I'm going to grab a couple of files from my other code. Now I reuse these files quite a bit. They're my data table headers and footers, and I'm not going to rewrite those from scratch. It's sort of a little working formula that I have. So we're going to take data table header and footer and bring them into our template directory. And again, the header is all of the scripts from datatables.net and the style sheets. So it looks like 4 style sheets and 12 scripts. And then the footer is a JavaScript. And I universally refer to my data tables as data table. So it always invokes this script at the bottom. So then for my HTML template, I include at the top, the very top and at the very bottom, outside of my if statements. So it doesn't matter what API I'm calling, I'm going to include data table header.j2, and at the very bottom outside of the if statement, I'm going to include data table footer.j2. So now it's a matter of writing nice HTML code. So what I need is a header, h1, and this one is network objects /h1, and then I want a table ID equals data table. Now this has to match what's in the footer script or it won't render the table properly. We need a table header, we need a table row, and then we need to make these table headers. Go to the end, /table header, /table row, and then we need to close our table header and open up our table body. Table body inside of the for loop, we need a table row, table td, /tr. Then we need to close our table body and close our table. Now let me just make sure that that's right. Close our header, close our body. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, so now we're not quite done. We're going to do our find replace magic here. So on the comma, for the headers, we're going to do a /table header, shift enter, 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 5, 6, 7, 8, /table header. So now when it gets down to the next inside of the for loop here, we change this from TD or from TH to TD. And boom, in theory, we should have a data table. So let's run the code. And do I have an HTML page or did I screw this up? Yeah, I didn't save this file. Let me run that code again. So there is our HTML page. And it worked. Oh, let me change the URLs. I always seem to forget that. So back in our template, under the link, this link here, we're going to make it an href. A href equals URL. /a. I think that's the right code. I might have to look that up. I think that's right though. Yeah, so now they're hyperlinks. Let me quickly reference some other code to make sure that my hyperlink is right there. It looks right. I know it's a hyperlink. I know that works, but I'm not sure if that's the correct href. I don't have any hrefs in this code. Hang on. CD, let's do business ready. Do I not do this? Where do I do this? I'm sure I have code where I do an href to a hyperlink. So it's not in there. Pyats. What about the ICE repo? Okay, here we go. Href equals Oh, I see. Yeah, see, that's not the way I wanted it. I'm glad I looked that up. That's not quite. It's close. It does work, but what I want is the href to be the link itself in quotes, and then inside of here say URL. That's better. Let's try that again. Glad I looked that up. And if I refresh this page, see, now it just says URL. Anyway, cosmetic. But we can sort and search and filter and find. All right, IPv4. I could do IPv4 or any, right? I can highlight them, I can print them, I can paginate them. I can even move these around if I want. I'm not sure why I picked description for the front field. I guess that I should have when I was copying the JSON. So let's refactor this and make it name at the front instead of description. So that'll just take a second. We just got to rearrange some stuff here. So let's start with our CSV file and take name and put it at the front. Take name, put it at the front, and then the Markdown file, we're going to do the same thing. We'll take name, put it at the front. I was a little hasty. I didn't really look at the order, but let's make name the front one, and then here we'll take name, put it at the front, and that's a little better order. Let's rerun the code, and now we have the name of it at the front. That's better. And we can reorder them any way we want. Okay, so now the last one is the mind map. Mind map is super easy to do. It's probably the easiest of the bunch because there's very little code involved. So we're going to copy the HTML code here, or function. Call this mind map file. And this is the mind map template. Mind map. Map, mind map, mind map. Now mind maps are .md files. Okay, so that code is done. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy, instead of copying the CSV, we'll copy the HTML. And it's a little easier to manipulate to make a mind map. So we don't need the data header. For sure, we got to get rid of that. We got to get rid of everything here from the body or from the header. Get rid of all of this HTML stuff. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our line, get rid of that. And this href, we're going to get rid of that. Okay, so now how do we make the mind map? So I'm going to make a header that says network objects, and then for each of them, let's use our line and get these back to the beginner. What we're going to do is we need at least 2, right? And I would add 3. And then for name, we're going to get rid of 1. And we're not going to put in name here. We could if we want. I like to just leave it as the name. Right, and then we just start filling in the fields. So that's description, DNS resolution, ID is system defined, and then what we can do here is maybe type, and give that 4, and subtype. We could even link them all together to have type and then subtype. I sort of like this as type. We can actually have types here and have type and subtype. How about that? And then we're going to have value version, and then this one can be a hyperlink. So we can do square bracket URL, square bracket, round brackets. And let's go ahead and generate our mind map. So there's our mind map. And if we render it, we have this wonderful mind map of our network objects. And let me see if I can maximize this. Right, so there's IPv6, IPv4, any. There's our private 1918 RFCs, and we can see the types has type and subtype, and the URL works. So that's, I don't know, what time did we start? Maybe an hour ago, not even an hour. I'm not sure how long I've been streaming, but that's business ready documents from the FTD. So we have, and we could do more. We could do audio files, we could do mermaid files, we could do network X graphs. These are sort of the core business ready files I like to think of. So what would be next for me? Well, I would need to dig up my pagination code, and it's not that hard to do. I just would need to call a reference of me handling a paginated API. Let me just quickly see if I can find some of that. I'll go for another couple of minutes if I can find. I think my gift wrap code is paginated. Is it paginated? Yeah. Let me just find the pagination. So capture state. So what we want to do is under the capture, so under the network objects here, we want to paginate it. Hang on, let me just see. I'm looking for this response list. Yeah, so this would be pretty straightforward. So under network objects, we have our response dictionary here, which has the response.json. And then I guess what I need to do is say, I need to look at the Json payload real quick. Well, see, I'm not sure what next is. If next is a URL or not, because if next is a URL, I'll just follow the next URL. So I actually need some paginated responses here to invoke, because what I would do instead is go get the next link and append it to the data. So the netbox isn't the greatest. Let me see some other code that's paginated. I think my Marvel Comet CD, do I not have it cloned? Hang on. I think my Uatu code from the Marvel API is paginated a little better with using the next page. Let me just quickly see here. It doesn't quite do it either. I have some code that uses the next. I'll have to dig it up. All right, so I wasn't really quite ready for pagination today, but for this to scale, right? If I had more than 10 network objects, I would definitely need to go to the next link. So I could say, while next, if next is not empty, go get the next page and return and append that data to the array. Something like that. I'll need to look it up. But for now, that's a pretty good start. We have network objects. We have our business ready. We have some pretty working code. We did this in about an hour together. And once I flush this out a little bit more, and I guess I'm not using OS, so I can get rid of that. I can put this up on PyPy and up on GitHub, and we can start building out more APIs and add the pagination. So thanks for joining. This was just a little bit of morning coffee API work, and I wanted to share because I started working on this FTD stuff. So let me push this into the repo, initial commit, and I don't have a README file, but it's pretty straightforward. And then let me add it to Poetry. Poetry version patch, Poetry build, Poetry publish under my token. And let me grab my token. And let me re-push this up. Whoops, what? Oh, maybe there is already a Sublimation package on PyPy. I thought I searched for it. I'm going to need a new name. Let me look. Sublimation. 810 packages. Well, I mean, I want an exact match. This one said Sublime. I'm not going to go through 40 pages of... Why wouldn't it bring it up to the top? It looks like it's a free name to me. Why can't I post that? Well, I'll need a new name. Oh well. Oh yeah, thank you, Pamela. So they had keep an eye out. Every once in a while they have it where if you submit code to the DevNet automation exchange. That's how I got the plushie, was submitting to the DevNet automation exchange. So it looks like I'm going to have to rename all this stuff to get it on PyPy for people to use. I'll have to come up with a funky name and rename and update my YAML file and everything else. So Sublimation's not going to cut it. I mean, I could call it Firehose or something like that. Is Firehose available on... Yeah, it's not. The hardest part's the name. It's not the code. So I'll come up with a name and I'll get it up on to PyPy. It is up on my GitHub under Sublimation, so maybe I should delete that repo and put it under a different name on my GitHub as well. But that wasn't the point today. The point was just to share and show you how we can work with the API for Firepower. So thanks for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll be around. I don't know if I'm going to do more streaming tomorrow or not, but have a great weekend. And to all my Canadians, enjoy your long weekend. We get Monday off, so enjoy your long weekend, Canadians. And Americans, have fun working on Monday. Okay, I'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.